Alright gang, we're going to do something a little bit different this time. We're going to get back to going through the chapters pretty soon, but I wanted to show y'all something different. There's a forms designer built in to NetBeans, which will let us create applications that look like this. Little graphical user interface. I mean, they don't even have to be little. I don't know why I use that word. Right? Well, this is one that I'll post the lecture about as well, in case you want to make this one. What this one does is it lets you type in some numbers and then click convert to hex, and it'll turn those into hex. And maybe you recognize that that's an IP address format. Anyways, we want to learn how to build things like that too. I'll post that lecture as well, but we want to start from scratch right now. So to do this one, what I'm going to do, let me show you a couple of things. I'm going to make a new project. And there's two ways that we could do this. One is to go ahead and let it create a main class, and one not to. I'm going to call this Lecture O, and I'm going to go ahead and let it make a main class. But you don't got to do it this way. In fact, normally I don't, but it will be educational. All right, so here we have our main class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our source packages and do new JFrame form. I'm going to click new JFrame form, right? I'm just going to call this form or my form, right? Some kind of distinctive name, my form. All right, when I run this, it's not going to do anything, right? We're not going to see any output. Main's not doing anything. In order to get it to run this form, I need to create an object using this class, because when I did that, when I made that, added that JFrame, in the designer, when you're looking at this dialog designer, there's a design button and a source button, and we will be switching between those two. Anyways, if I click source, I see the name of the class that I just created, my form. I can blip over here. You know what? I need these two things to be in the same directory for this to work correctly, in the same package. So I'm just going to grab Lecture O and pull it into the default package. You can let me do that? There we go. And it didn't have to be that way, but it makes it a little bit easier. So down here in main, I need to make a new form like this. And when I say make a new form, I need to create an object. My form mf is equal to new my form, right? And then I need to run it. So how am I going to run it? This thing has an init components method, or it has a constructor which builds it. Hope we've talked about constructors already. So as soon as we create that form, it runs this little bit of code right here, which is good. We can prove that it does it by adding a system.out.print message over here in my form, right? My form constructed, right? Just to prove. So over here, back in main, inside our lecture file, by the time we do that, it should create that object, and we should see its output down here. So I'm going to run it again. And it says my form constructed. However, we don't see that dialog, do we? We don't see that JFrame anywhere. The frame is the dialog with all the pictures on it. We haven't added any buttons to it yet. It needs to be set to visible. mf.set visible true, right? That sets that frame to be visible. Now when we run it, it's there. It's running, right? That's one way to do it, and it's a good way to do it. Another thing you could do is let's remake the entire package remake the entire project. So I'm going to do new project, and I want it to not have a main class. To do that, I could just do Java with Maven, right? And then, because Maven does not create the main, I'm going to go ahead and do it with Ant since I've been doing that the whole time. Choose next, but I don't want it to make a main class. So I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to call it Lecture O, maybe Lecture O2 to separate it from that last lecture file that I just created. And I need to close these old ones. All right, now there are no Java files in this project at all. Well, there's going to be one now. I'm going to come right click on default package and do new JFrame form. It's going to leave its name alone. I don't care. And there, right? We have our folder. We could drag buttons out onto it or anything like that. We have this palette over here of useful tools, right? I assume if we can't find it, we'll be able to enable it by some window exposing thing over here. Anyways, drag the button out. All right. Now when I run it, it's going to say, does not have a main class set. And it's very true, it doesn't. Now, the last time I gave this lecture, we ran into a problem where it did not offer our class, right? When we ran it, it did not select the main class. It did not even offer it. And that student had to build it first before trying to run it. And by habit, I usually do that. And this time, I hadn't, or she hadn't, or something like that. But now when I run it, it offers to make the main class. Now what is that really doing? That's just coming over here into the preferences. I'm going to right click on my project and choose properties and click run. And there's no main class selected. So the Java runtime engine doesn't know what to run. So if I click browse, there it goes, right? But I can do that just as easily in this particular case by clicking the run button, going ahead and clicking my main class. And it runs. Boom, right? So that saves me a little bit of time. I don't have to go into the main method of another class and create an object and set visible to true because that's already done. If I want to find out where that happens, I can go and look, and inside my JFrame class, there is a main method which calls itself, builds itself, right? Creates a new JFrame and sets visible to true. And it does it through a little bit more sophisticated mechanism than what we were doing here, but it works just fine. All right, so enough about how to start the whole thing. Let's go ahead and make our form. So as I said, we have both the source and the design. Why don't I just make a form that adds two numbers and displays the result, right? So this is going to be my add button, and it needs two places to type in numbers. Well, those are text fields. So I'm going to come over here to the palette, swing controls, grab a text field, grab another text field, and I already have this button out here, and I need a text field to hold the result, right? To display the result, 1 plus 1 equals 2. Alrighty. So, one thing you want to do after you drag fields out, after you drag controls out, is to give them better names, variable names. What do I mean by that? You can right-click on a control and choose Change Variable Name and give it a better name. Why would you want to do that? Because otherwise, when you're looking at the source, all those references are just like kind of these generic names, right? I don't want these generic names, I want this to say add button or something like that. And, input 1 and input 2 and result, those kind of things, make the code easier to read. So I'm going to go back to design and I'm going to rename all of these controls. This is input 1. So I'm going to right click it and do change variable name and call it input 1. Gonna do the same thing for input 2. Right click, change variable name, input 2. This is the result. So I'm going to right click, change variable name and call it result. And this is the add button. So I'm going to right click, change variable name and call it add button. Now when it runs, here's what our interface looks like right now. Well, I don't want it to be filled in with that text and that text, I want these to like be zeros or something to indicate that they should enter numbers there. And I want that to say add. That's easy to fix. I just come over here, right click on this and do edit text. Notice as I make these changes, there's this thing over here called properties, right? Here's the text property for that. I could change it here, or I could right click it and change it here. This is add, right? So I could type in add there and change it right there. These, I just want to be filled in with zeros. So I'm going to edit the text, fill that in with a 0, right? But it shrinks it down when I do that, so I'm going to stretch it back out. Same for that one. Right click, edit text, fill with a 0. And it kind of blipped that over, didn't it? I'm not liking how it did that. It resized everything. You have to kind of fight with it a little bit. And then this one, this is the result. It also needs to be 0, right? And so we see over here in the properties. And if this wasn't showing, I could right click, whoopsie, I could right click on it and choose properties down here. And we'd see the same window that was over here. Could change the text there. There. Now it'd be neat if I could draw a horizontal line here, just like you add that number and you add that number and you get a result. And that just occurred to me, so I haven't figured out how to do that yet. I'm not seeing it. Not going to take hardly any time to figure out how to do it. Yeah, I'm not going to take any time to figure out how to do it. Alrighty. Now, if you want to move these things around, you could grab all of them. You see how I drew a box around them, and you can move them up. Something like that. Now, we want to be able to fill in this number and fill in this number. But this one, we don't want to be editable, right? Because if we type in 1 and 1, we don't want to be able to come back in and change that to 3. So this needs to be non-editable. Over here in Properties, the very top field here, the very top property, is editable. I don't want it to be editable. So now when I run it, right, I could type in some numbers. Doesn't do anything, right? I haven't added any code to actually handle the add. But I can't change that one. Good. We need to make the add button do something, right? I need to add an event handler that'll handle what happens when the button is clicked. Well, when you click on it and you see events over here, we see that there are no events attached to it. There are no event listeners waiting for this to be clicked. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to double click my button, and it's going to create some code for it. The add button action performed code. Right now I'm in the source window rather than the design window. If I go back to design and I click on the add button and click on events, I will see now that it has filled in an event for it. Now if I do that by mistake, right, I accidentally double click on one of these controls, it also creates a method for that. That's not a problem. It's kind of an annoyance when you're scrolling up and down and you see this useless method here, but it doesn't break it. It'll still run it, right? When I click on it and nothing happens, it's going into this method, but not doing anything. And that's okay, but I might want to remove that spurious method. So I'm going to go back to the designer. Oh, well, why don't you just delete it? Right? I highlighted there and I hit the delete key. No, right? This gray stuff means, this gray shading means that you cannot delete it. You cannot change those parts. I can't rename this button, for example. The form designer is handling that part of the code, and the only stuff that I can do is edit the white parts. But I want that method gone. So I'm going to go back to the designer, find the control that had that new button, that new method attached to it, click on events, and there where it says action performed, I don't want it to say that. I don't want it to say anything, so I'm just going to backspace over it, right? Maybe hit return. Now that method should be gone. If I go back to the source code, that method is gone. So it's not a big deal if you accidentally click on a control and you add a method that you didn't want. The only method that we really want is one for the add button, right? So if I double click on the add button, here we go. So these things are actually text. When you ask the control to give up its contents so that you can do something with it, it is text. It is not a number. It looks like a number, right? But it is text. Everything that you display on the screen is text. When you read it in, it's going to be text. You have to convert it to a number yourself in order to do something with it. And on its way back out to display it out here, it also has to be text. So that adds a little bit of complexity that we did not have to do when we had, scanner.nextInt, right? Or next double or whatever. Because we were able to read things in and the scanner would convert it to numeric form. But that's not true for this. So over here in this source, double click on add again, I need to get those two pieces of data out. String S1 for input 1, right? Comma S2, comma result. I'm not really liking my variables there. They're a little bit too cryptic there. How about SI for input 1, SI for input 2, and SR for string result? Still not great, but that'll work. We need to get that text from the control. Well, what was the control's name? This control's variable name is input 1. Great. Back to source, SI1 is equal to input 1. Now I'm not remembering the variable name very well, so I'm going to type this dot input 1 dot get text. We have to get the text out of it. Same thing for string input 2. SI2 equals this dot input 2 dot get text. And if you type in a control name, right, and it's underlined, it's saying it doesn't exist, you can always, rewind and do this dot and get a list of your controls, and you'll find out that no, it actually wasn't named that, and maybe you have to go back to the code screen and rename the variable. So this dot input 2 dot get text. Maybe I don't like seeing the word this everywhere. I could go back and I could delete that if I thought it cleaned up the code a little bit. Now we need to convert them to numbers. So int n1, comma n2, and maybe nr for result, right? We need to convert them. So n1 is equal to integer with a capital I. We're going to use the wrapper classes. Integer dot parse int with another capital I, parentheses, si1 for input 1. n2 is equal to integer dot parse int si2. Right. We're just taking this text, this string, and converting it into numeric form. Now, it's possible for this to blow up. What do I mean by that? If they type in letters rather than numbers, the parseInt is going to generate an exception. We've already demonstrated exception handling in the past. Now, just out of a little bit of precognition, I know that I need to give these things some initial values. Just to planning ahead, because, well, just trust me on that one. There's nothing wrong with giving some initial values, even though Java likes to give you warnings. Value is not used. Who cares? I want them there anyways. Now I can get the result, right? I could say that nr is equal to n1 plus n2. And then I can set the result. SR equals integer dot to string, capital S, nr. And now we need to set the text of that last control with this string that we just generated. So this dot result dot set text, parentheses in parentheses, with that string. Alrighty, I think we're good to go. I think it'll work. Build it, run it. Alrighty. Add, and it did update it. It updated it with 9. Maybe I'd like for these things to be larger and have, bigger text and stuff like that. I could go back in to the designer and I could try to choose properties, find the font, try to pick its size. I could mess with it, larger font size and things like that. I'm not going to, but I could. And I could pick different colors for the text. I could find the background color and I could change the background color for it. Lots of different things I could do. I'm going to add one more button just for fun, a clear button, right? Just like a calculator. You want to clear all these controls. Well, that's another button, isn't it? Drag that out. Edit text to clear. Change the name of it to clear underscore button. And yeah, I know, the book would want us to do clear button like that, right? There we go, right? I'm going to double click on it to create the event for it. Right now there's no event. Double click on it. What does a clear button need to do? It just needs to reset all those things to 0. So input1 dot set text with capital T, parentheses, quote, 0, end quote, in parentheses, semicolon. And do the same thing for input2 and result. Input2 dot set text, parentheses, quote, 0, end quote, in parentheses. Result dot set text, parentheses, quote, 0, end quote, in parentheses, right? So that's all the clear button needs to do, is reset all the controls to 0. All right, look good? Clear button sets them to 0. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to add, well, we got a little bit more that we need to do to this. And what do I mean by that? If I type in garbage and I click add, it generates an exception. Now I won't say it crashes it, because oddly enough, it's still ready to go. It's handling the button click in a separate thread of execution, so that even if it crashes, it doesn't crash the entire program. So that's cool, but I don't want it to generate all this red text here. I want it to print an error message down here. If they type in something here, I want the word error to appear or something like that. Now what would be really awesome is if we could change the background color of that control to tell them where it went wrong. That's a little bit beyond what we're doing here. It's a cool idea though. You can change the background color of something by setting its background color like this. Up to here, when we set the text of that control of the result, we could do this dot result dot set background parentheses, and it fills in color.red for us. I don't know if that's the color that I want. I'm going to type in color dot light gray, right? Or yellow. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. How about yellow? That'll look nasty, but there we go. So we're back inside add button action performed. And as soon as it sets its text, it sets the result to yellow. Ooh, I'm typing in letters and I don't mean to. 6 and 5, click add, and it sets it right to yellow. And if I click clear, it'd be nice if it went back to being white. Well, I can do that. I'm going to find my clear method. Result.setText. No. I don't want to set the text. I want to set the background. Result.set background, and it fills in color red. That's great. And I don't want it to be color red. I want it to be color.white. You can use uppercase or lowercase. Both of them work. Build it. I have too many copies of my program running. Right. It says Lecture 2 run down here. I'm going to click the little X to kill my duplicate copies. Run it again. When I click add, puts it there. When I click clear, sets it back to white. Kind of nifty. All right. The only thing I want to fix, the last thing I want to fix, is what happens if you type in garbage here and it generates an exception. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to have to use try catch in order to handle that exception. Well, the exception that was generated was java.lang.numberFormat exception. And if you recall, this package, java.lang, is imported automatically, so I don't have to go up to the top and add import java.lang in order to use number format exception. I've lost my place. I'm just going to go to the designer, double click on add, takes me back to where I was. Okay, great. This is the part of code that can break here. So what I want to do is I want to put everything from here to here inside a try block. Why do I want to even include this line in the try block? Because if it fails, I want to be able to set the result string equal to an error message. All right, so here I'm going to put the word try. Curly brace. Tab these guys over. And now I need to handle the exception with a catch. So catch, parentheses, what kind of exception is it? It's a number format exception. Number format exception, space EX in parentheses. What am I going to do? I'm just going to set the return string equal to an error message. Maybe just the word error, right? So now I'm going to run it. Looks like I already have a copy of it going. Build it. Run it. All right. Make sure I haven't broken it. I'm going to add a number. Works. Now I'm going to add some garbage to it. Error. You see what I mean? Wouldn't it be nice to light that one up as well? Or wouldn't it be better to actually display a good error message? Maybe we could even display a pop-up window. If we wanted to display a pop-up window, that would not be too hard. I think I'm going to leave that alone though. Maybe we'll do that in a future lecture. It's called a message box. Okay, so what I would like for you to do is to add a multiply button and a divide button and a subtract button, right? We already have an add button. Add some more buttons and then double click on each one to add their event handler. And then pretty much all you're going to have to do from that point is to copy everything from here to here and paste it, right? And what's the one change you're going to need to make? Instead of adding, you're going to multiply, or you're going to divide, or you're going to subtract, or you're going to add. Now, I probably should just give you this project so you can modify it yourself, right? Rather than have to type all this in. But it's a useful skill for you. But I didn't tell you right from the get-go that you needed to be typing it all in. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and export it. So I'm going to do File, Export Package to Zip. I need to pick a better browse directory than this. So I'm just going to save it in my Downloads directory. And I'm going to give it the name Lecture O export.zip. Or maybe I should call it import because that's what you're going to do with it. Then I click export and it creates the file, right? So all you're going to have to do is when you're ready to build this, you're going to launch NetBeans. You're not going to even click new project. You're instead going to do import from zip. So when I click import, I should be able to choose a directory and it should let me create a file. Your interface may be a little bit different. So I'm going to call it new folder and I'm going to call it lecture 0 import. Or you could call it homework 10 or whatever homework or assignment. Homework we are on. Let's go look. We are on homework. Go, go, go. $11. All right. So instead of new folder, homework 11. However you name them. I know it does not exist. Rename it this way. Now I think we're good to go. It's created, its file name is here. I can click save, I can click import. Boom, it finally all worked. I apologize for the fumbling around there. I should probably edit that out. Yeah, I better edit that out before I upload it. Okay. Worst comes to worst, you could rewatch the video and you could recreate the project yourself, which would probably be the better thing to do. As a matter of fact, when I give you the homework assignment, when I give you the lecture, I'll add the text saying that you really should follow along with these steps this time because it's going to turn into a homework assignment. But I'll upload the export file anyways for those who don't. Alrighty, I hope that was educational. Let me know if it turns out that it's difficult for you to create the form. Usually students kind of like this particular project, this particular homework, and are able to get into the idea of it pretty easily.